In 1 Kings 19:4, we read of Elijah. You don't really need to turn. He himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a juniper tree. And he requested for himself that he might die, and says, "It is enough now, O Lord. Took away my life, for I'm not better than my fathers." I distributed the outline for today's study on irresistible grace, but I'm not going to preach on it. My mind and my heart are not there. It is not that I don't love it and don't believe it intensely and think you would be profited by it. But events have transpired this week, things that have happened that have led me to being with Elijah today under the juniper tree. Every minister of God from time to time sits with Elijah under the juniper tree. There are certain things that weigh very, very heavily upon me. Last night for me was a very, very dark night. I could look at the outline, but I just couldn't get with it. And I think if I were to do it today, it would be dry lecture. Just my heart wouldn't be in it like it should be to do it the justice that should be done. And some other things have occurred to me, and I want to talk about, but I do not have structure or organization to it. I will just speak of it as it comes to my mind, and hopefully you glean something from it. The reason that I am in such darkness is owing to some things that you know, that I deal with as a pastor. There are other things that weigh heavily upon me that I am not at liberty to reveal. But they hurt, and they weigh heavily. What I want to begin by talking about is the human will, and the fact that because of our will, we make choices. That's what we mean by freedom of will. Yeah. We mean the freedom to make choices. We all make choices. And our lives are largely what they are because of the choices we make. You show me the choices a man or woman makes, and I will show you their character. I will show you what they love. I will show you what they delight in. And I will show you what they value. The Son of God, in Matthew chapter 6, said this. I think this is a good place to start. He said in verse 20, "Lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." The will is a function of the heart. The Bible talks about as a man purposeth in his heart in 2 Corinthians 9. In Hebrews 4, he mentions the thoughts and intents of the heart. It is with the heart we think. It is with the heart we intend. We plan. We purpose. We decide. We will. We read in the Bible of those whose heart made them willing. The will proceeds out of the heart. But notice your heart, your will be where your treasure is. What you value will determine what you choose. And what you choose will reveal what you are. It will reveal those values. And your choices will go to shape your character. We are all what we are, largely because of the choices we make. Think of why the human condition is so ruined and so depraved. How did it get there? Because of a choice. A free, unconstrained choice made by our father Adam, prompted by what our mother Eve had chosen to do. And we'll look at what was behind that momentarily. One of the things that I've learned to do, and I ask that you do the same, that when you read your Bible, if you even do, and think about it, what you read, if you even bother to do that. And if you don't, that's a choice. A choice that says something about you and your value system. But when you do, pay attention to the word will. I will. I will. I will. Just as an example, but before I do that, again, there's not organization here. But before I do that, I want to point something out. The book of Proverbs exalts wisdom. Yes. It was given to know wisdom. And wisdom is that thing that is going to bring your human potential to the best that it can be. We are told in Proverbs 4 and verse 8 about wisdom. Exalt her, and she shall promote thee. Yeah. And she shall bring thee to honor when thou dost embrace her. She shall give to thine head an ornament of grace, and a crown of glory shall she deliver to thee. But what is wisdom? Wisdom is the capacity of judging rightly. You know what a judgment is? It's a decision. I could just as easily say it is the capacity of deciding rightly. The capacity of making the right decisions in matters relating to life and conduct. Soundness of judgment in the choice of means and ends. We're talking here about decisions. We are talking about choices. But we're obviously talking about right decisions and right choices. And when right decisions are made and right choices are made, they bring our life to the best potential that it can be by the grace of God. So just remember that. Your choices go to make up who you are, what your life is, what you will to do. Now I read the Psalms, and I read things like this. In Psalm 9, as an example, and verse 1. I will praise thee, O Lord, with my whole heart. I will show forth all thy marvelous kindness. Why am I going to worship God? Because I will to do so. I will. I determine. I decide. This is what I'm going to do. I love Psalm 101 because how it brings to fore this whole issue of the will. I will. And we could say that wisdom is the correct exercise of the will. For from whence proceeds our decisions, our judgments, and our choices, but from our will. We decide to do what we do because we choose to, we want to, we will to. Psalm 101, I will sing of mercy and judgment unto thee, O Lord. Will I sing. I will behave myself wisely. You act the way you do because of the will. The choices you make. The decisions you make. I will behave myself wisely in a perfect way. O when wilt thou come unto me? I will walk within mine house with a perfect heart. I'm going to live an upright life. I will do it. But I will do it within my house. How you act, how you behave in your house when we aren't looking is what you are. Any of us can put on a nice front so our brethren think we are pious. But what are we with our wives, with our children? How do we treat those nearest to us? How do we behave there? And how we behave there all goes back to, what do I want to do? What do I will to do? What do I choose to do? I will set no wicked thing before mine eyes. I hate the work of them that turn aside. It shall not cleave to me. And then this word pops up a lot in Psalm 119. And I had a good bit to say about this. And I'm going to read some things to you today. I apologize again if there is a lack of organization. I'm ad-libbing. I lay awake much of last night, tossing through my mind what I wanted to say. I spent a good bit of time this morning, hit and miss here and there, because I did not decide upon this until probably around 9:30 last night. This just came upon me because of things that were said this week, things that happened this week, particularly things that happened yesterday. Some things I will reveal, some I cannot. But David made these statements, or the psalmist rather. I was careful when I wrote my blogs on this not to attribute this to David, though most do. But I have no clear-cut evidence that David was the author. One can surmise, but I don't think it can be conclusively proven. So I tried to steer away from what I could not conclusively prove. I tried to do that. But he makes two statements. He says in verse 15, I will meditate, think, ponder, consider. I will meditate in thy precepts and have respect unto thy ways. I will delight myself in thy statutes. I will not forget thy word. 3 I wills. I will meditate. I will delight. I will not forget. And I wrote this. I said, zero in, speaking of verse 15, on those first 2 words, I will. We considered those words when we dealt with verse 8. I will keep thy statutes. We pointed out at that time that you must exercise your will in order to obey God's commandments. If you only obey God on a wave of emotion, you will not stick with it. We never stick with anything that we do on a wave of emotion, because emotions are just that. They're waves, back and forth, up and down. As soon as the emotion dies down, and it will, you will be onto something else. The same applies to meditation. You have to determine, will, to meditate whether you feel like doing it or not. The thoughts of the mind must be harnessed and forced. How much do we force our brains to go to certain places? Force. With so many distractions as we have in our modern culture, it becomes increasingly more difficult to force the mind You think the devil doesn't know that? You think he doesn't know that? Which means we are going to have to make some decisions to step apart from some things, to force the mind. The mind must be harnessed and forced to focus on God's Word if we are to derive maximum benefit from it. Failure to spend time meditating in God's Word is not really owing to a lack of time. It is owing to a lack of will. If you want to do something enough, you will find a way to do it. It is amazing how people figure out ways to do things when they want to, when they will to. Commenting further on this, let me make sure I haven't overlooked something I wanted to bring out. How about that? Verse 16. I will delight myself in thy statutes. I will not forget thy word. Note again the expression, I will. The psalmist resolves that he will delight in God's statutes and will not forget his word. He will do these two things because he wants to do them. Isn't that why we will to do what we do? Because we want to? Doesn't that factor into it? And therefore he intends to do them. He decides to do what he wants to do. It is a fact that most people do what they want to do most of the time. If you really want to do something, you will generally find a way to do it. Most of our negligence does not arise from lack of opportunity, but from lack of will. Note he states that I will delight in thy precepts. The point there being, he will harness his emotions. He will because what is delight? It is an emotion. And when he says, I will delight, he is saying that he is going to subject his emotion to the direction of his will. Sometimes you just have to force those emotions in directions they may not want to go. Sadly, too many subject their wills to their emotions. They decide because it's what they feel like doing. They do what they feel like. Rather, we should subject our emotions to our wills. The emotion may resist at first, and often does. But eventually it will give way if you want it to. It comes back to the will, and that is the key. You have to be willing. You have to want to delight in God's statutes. If you want to enjoy the Bible, you will. And if you don't, inevitably it goes back to the will. There isn't the want. There isn't the will to harness the emotion. The delight will come with the willingness. And then that point, I will not forget thy word. I will not forget thy word. Get the will in that as well. This verse, I will not forget thy word, gives us two things that are helpful in remembering something. The first thing is the will. I will not forget. You will more likely forget something if you make no effort to remember it. You make no decision to remember it. Sometimes that's the wisest thing to do, is to choose not to remember something. We can't remember everything. One of the keys to having a good memory is being able to sort out what needs to be remembered from what is just as well forgotten. A memory uncluttered with useless information will have more capacity for remembering what is necessary and useful. Now, God's Word is that one thing most necessary and useful for us to remember. And if you're going to remember it, you must want to remember it. The will must be involved. Do you see how much the will plays into delight? Do you see how much the will plays into memory? And there are two things that make you what you are. The things you delight in and the things you remember. This is the horror of Alzheimer's disease. Because as it robs the person of their memory, it robs the person of who they are. Comes back to the will. I will remember. I will not forget. I will delight. I will. I will. And then there is this verse down in verse 35. Make me to go in the path of thy commandments, for therein do I delight. Let's go back to the delights. Because the delights certainly have a great influence on the will. They do. How often the will is directed by what we like, what we delight in, what we love. And that may be good, but very often it is not. And that's one of the places I want to go. But I first of all want to give you this thing about delight. Now the psalmist advances this reason for the Lord to make him to go in the path of his commandments. For therein do I delight. The person who finds his greatest pleasure in obeying the Lord is the person who will most earnestly pray for God to strengthen him to obey. Our delights determine what we most seek after. Our delights determine, our delights influence our will. And that's where we have to be very careful. We have to be careful that the delight is one that ought to influence our will. And if it doesn't, if it's not one, the will must kick in and subordinate the delight into the direction in which it ought to go. Our delights determine what we most seek after. So examine the things you most enjoy. Those things that turn your crank, as we say. And upon finding those things, you will also find what shapes your desires and what shapes your prayers. What shapes your desires? What shapes your will? Is health your greatest delight? Then this will be the foremost thing you ask the Lord for. Is being able to come and go as you please your greatest delight? Then you will always be praying for relief from whatever is keeping you from doing that. Is money your greatest delight? Then your prayers will in some way or another mostly revolve around that. Give me a job, Lord. Let the deal go through, Lord. Prosper the markets, Lord. And on we could go. And I am not saying these prayers are necessarily wrong. But should they be the foremost desire of your heart? If the greatest delight of your life is pleasing the Lord, then asking God to enable you to do that will be your foremost request. And interestingly enough, a lot of other good things will come with that answer to prayer. As our Lord said, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. Matthew 6:33. Our will, our decisions, reveal our character, determine the direction of our life. And our will is reflected in our decision and in our choices, which are influenced by our delights. Therein is where we need to stop and examine our delights. for they have a bearing on our will. But let me bring something else out. I was greatly moved. I've never forgotten it. I love this book by A.W. Tozer. If you've ever read the writings of Tozer, you've read some rich stuff. Man, the dwelling place of God. I have read this to you before. I am going to read it to you again. Because it is powerful. Powerful. But also uncomfortable. Because it peels back the layers and shows us what we really are. And if I was going to say, what is this sermon about? I'd have to say it's about peeling back all the rationalizations and all of the excuses and getting down to the core that I do what I do, I have what I have, because it's what I will. And being devastatingly honest with ourselves about why we do the things we do and have the things we have that all go up to make what we are. It comes down to the will. We're all very good at rationalizing things. We're all very, very good at that. Proverbs 16:2 says, all the ways of man are clean in his own eyes, but the Lord weigheth the spirits. Proverbs 21:2, every way of man's right in his own eyes, but the Lord pondereth his heart. And we can all justify whatever we do. We're excellent at it. But God knows the real reason. He gets down to the core. And sadly, one of my jobs, you say, why do you say sadly? Sadly for me, because it isn't one of the more fun things I do. But as his messenger, as his minister, as the watchman for your souls, he says to me in Jeremiah 6:27, I've set thee for a tower and a fortress among my people, that thou mayest know and try their way. My job is to take your choices, which taken together determine the way of your life, and put them under scrutiny. To try to get you to do that simple thing, examine yourself, search and try your ways, and to ask yourself, why do I do what I do? Why do I make the decisions that I do? Why did I buy that? Why did I upgrade? Why did I make that investment? Why did I choose that friendship? Why did I break it off? Why? Instead of being rushed headlong by passion and fashion and the tenor of the times. A.W. Tozer had this to say. He was quoting from Acts 4:23. When the apostles had been released from prison, Acts 4:23. After they had been tried, after their apprehension, it is said in verse 23, and being let go, they went to their own company and reported all that the chief priests and elders had said unto them. And when they'd heard that, they lifted up their voice to God with one accord, and they had prayer and praise. With people that had a mind to pray and praise. People that had the same will and the mindset that the psalmist said when he said, I will rejoice and sing praise to thy name. People like that. I will call upon the name of the Lord as long as I live. You read that in the Psalms. You see a decision, a will, an act of the will. And people that had that kind of will bent determination and mindset, they chose to go be with them. And Mr. Tozer, and these words again are penetrating, they are not comfortable to listen to. They're not comfortable to listen to. Into 9 words, having altogether but 11 syllables, Luke packs a world of universal truth. Being let go, they went to their own company. Every normal man has a company, however small, where he feels at home, and to which he will return when he is tired of being alone. The important thing about a man is not where he goes when he is compelled to go, but where he goes when he is free to go where he will. The apostles went to jail, and that is not too revealing, because they went there against their will. The things you're forced to do against your will don't really say much about who you are or your character. But when they got out of jail and could go where they would, here's the rub. They immediately went to the praying company. From this we learn a great deal about them. The choices of life, not the compulsions, reveal character. The choices of life, not the compulsions, reveal character. A man is absent from church Sunday morning. Where is he? If he is in a hospital having his appendix removed, his absence tells us nothing about him except that he is ill. But if he's out on the golf course, that tells us a lot. To go to the hospital is compulsory. To go to the golf course, voluntary. The man is free to choose. He chooses to play instead of to pray. His choice reveals what kind of man he is. Choices always do. The difference between a slave society and a free one lies in the number of free acts possible in each, as compared with acts of compulsion. No society is wholly slave, as none is wholly free. But in a free society, the voluntary choices are at a maximum, and the acts of compulsion relatively few. In the slave society, the proportions are exactly reversed. The true character of a people is revealed in the uses it makes of its freedoms, and it's true of you. The choices you make, not when you are compelled, but when you are free, tell what you are and tell what you value and where your treasure is. Period. Make no mistake about it. Now, I will read something else to you. And I will tell you now what got me thinking along these lines. And one thing that for me made yesterday a dark day. I got a new computer. It is my intention with this computer to take the features that I like on my iPad that you gave me and integrate it into the laptop, so that I do not spend my day suspended between two devices. I have only one. I want to simplify it. I want to simplify it. Edgar has been such a help to me. He's my computer geek when I'm in trouble. And he's helped me so much. And I appreciate it so much. And he came yesterday to help me get things set up. And we were hitting roadblocks to where I don't know now if I can achieve the goal that I set out to achieve. I want to be able to text on my laptop rather than have it over here. But the problem is the text services that would permit me to text on my laptop are wanting me to have an iPhone or a smartphone. I don't want one. I can afford it as easily as every one of you in here can. In fact, more so than some of you can. There is one reason why I don't have it. I don't want it. I don't want it. I don't want to take the internet with me everywhere I go. I don't need it. I don't want it. Why do you have it? I will tell you why you have it. I will tell you why you do it. Some of you, work requires it. Most of you, because you want it. No matter what rationalizations you make, at the end of the day, you have it because you like it and because you want it. And I was getting upset about this. I said, they're pushing us to these iPhones. And Edgar came back with a reply, a stinging reply, a painful reply for me. He said, it is that way because this is what people want. This is what people want. It is here because this is what we want. The new vehicles will not even have CD players. The one that I rented the other day whilst my car was in repair had no thing for insertion of CDs like I like to do to play music on the way. They want you to have a phone. Do it through a phone. But this is what people want, and he's right. It's this way because this is what people want. But brethren, let me remind you of something very simple. It is the things, and not only that, let me take that one step further. It is wanted because it is liked. It's what we love. It's what we delight in. And this is why it is there. And lest I sound like a hypocrite, you gave me an iPad. There are features on it I like. That's why I keep it. I can honestly say that I use it principally for work. I use it for research. I use it for study. Only very marginally do I ever use it for pleasure. But I have it, if I distill it all down, because I want it. When I went to the Philippines for the first time, I got a cellular phone, a little flip phone. I could justify that because that was the principal means of communication in the Philippines. I could call home for very cheap, 10 cents a minute. And it worked well for that. Texting on those devices is a principal means of communication, and I need to communicate with the people that I was working with. But when I came home, I didn't get rid of it. I kept it. It stays off most of the time. Whenever I use it, turn it on. And as soon as I'm done using it, I want that thing off so badly that I just immediately get it off. I don't want to go with the phone being tied to, being contactable by a phone. When that whole thing came out, the idea of going everywhere with a phone wrapped around me, I couldn't, that just something about that didn't sit right. And you may remember the first sermon I ever preached on it. I told you when I said it, this will do no good. And I was right. It didn't. And I knew it wouldn't. The men met last week to discuss ways to put distance between ourselves and these devices, given the addictive nature of them, which is no secret. It is a fact. And Greg submitted some information. He sent it to me. He submitted some information that he purposed to cover with the men. And he made a statement. He said, we need to count the cost before we get these digital media devices. He said, most of us did not do that. Now pastor has to exercise damage control. Greg, I appreciate your candor. I appreciate your candor. But my brother, it is small comfort. It's just the disappointment that I just have to live with. And I do. And I love you. But it's what people want. But people, do you not realize that so often it is what we want that gets us in trouble? That it's what we delight in and love that gets us in trouble. In my own life. And I want to say this before I go any further. Again, this is not organized, so you'll have to bear with the slipshod as it comes to me. And it's on my mind now, and I want to say it. With regard to my phone, I kept it. Why did I do it? Because there is that odd convenience that I have with it that I like. That's why I kept it. And that's what I use it for. But most of the time it is off, unlike most of you with yours. But lest I sound very accusatory in that statement, I want you to know how I think. You gave me an iPad. And on that iPad, I have all the technology you have on your computer phones without it being a phone. I work at home. I'm in my office most of the time. So most of the time, I am around a device that gives me the same thing your phones give you. So to be fair, if I were going to compare my usage with yours, I would need to factor in not only what I do with my little flip phone, but what I do with my iPad, and then lay all that out together. And the truth of the matter is, some of us probably are running even on that one. And I tell you that. I have to tell you that. Because if I didn't examine myself like that, if I did not subject myself to that kind of scrutiny, and yet I was up here rebuking you and barking at you, I'd be a hypocrite. Because Jesus says when you judge another for the thing you do yourself, he calls you a hypocrite. And if I'm a hypocrite, I'm not a true man. And if I'm not a true man, I have no right to claim to be a man of God. So it is incumbent upon me that I subject myself to the same scrutiny that I subject to you. What I'm after this morning, if you want to know what's my takeaway, it is this. To shuffle through all the rationalizations and excuses and this and get down to the core of the will. This is here because I will. Because I want. Because that's what God wants to see. And is it wrong for us to want? Is it wrong for us to delight in certain things and to enjoy certain things? Absolutely not. For is it not written in 1 Timothy chapter 6 that God giveth us richly all things to enjoy? God gave Israel a bountiful land. Wells they did not dig. Vineyards they did not plant. Cities they did not build. Handed it to them. The creme de la creme of a country. And allowed them to enjoy it. But, with a warning, I will presently read. But this is the verse I'm trying to get to. I better get there or I'll dance off of it. In Proverbs 51:6. Behold, thou desirest truth in the inward parts, and in the hidden part thou shalt make me to know wisdom. That is Psalm 51 and verse 6. Did I say Proverbs? I'm sorry. Thank you. Please do that. in Psalm 51:6. What does God want from you this morning? He's going to tell you what he wants. Thou desirest truth in the inward parts. He wants you to dig down into your innermost self and realize the truth about what you do, the decisions you make, and face up to it and be honest. That's what he wants. To be able to say, I have this in my... Why do I continue the study of foreign languages when really, what use do I have for it other than to talk to people in another language and the pleasure it brings to me? I can say that it helps me to keep continually involved in the science of language. It helps me understand my own language better. And so in one way, I think it contributes to what I do. And that is true. But really, deep down, it starts here. Because I like it. And I want it. That's why. Why do I watch a movie on Friday night and have a bowl of popcorn and a beer? Because I like it. Because I want it. That's really what it's all about. Why do I go to the gym? Oh yeah, it helps to keep me healthy. I think it's good for me. But I really do it because I want to. That's really it. And because there's something about it I delight in. Let's get down and really realize it starts with the will, with the decision. But the thing that I want to bring you back to is this thing about this stuff is here because it's what people want. It's what people like. How true. Why is there so much filth in the movies? Why is it there? Because it's what people want. But I'm going to tell you something that is going to sting. I'm going to tell you another reason it's there. I'm going to tell you why it's there. Because you, Christian, have an adversary that wants to weaken you, that wants you to develop an indifferent attitude toward, yea, even the grossest and most abominable sin. And so he takes what is brilliant theatrics, brilliant drama, and brilliant entertainment, and peppers it with that filth, because he knows you want to be entertained so desperately you'll tolerate it. Because that's how much you want to be entertained. It's like we view it as a necessity. I have to admire some of these people in some of these fundamentalist circles. They won't even have a TV for that reason. I go to these conferences. I see the young ladies dressed in very modest dresses, calf length. You never seen them wearing these yoga pants, tight-fitting slacks. I look at that. I admire it. I wonder, I search myself, do I err to permit that? I have not as yet arrived at a settled conviction that that is a stand that I must take. And so I don't. But I still admire them for it. The problem is, with these people and these standards, it becomes their religion. That's right. And they don't have a clue how a sinner is saved. That's right. They don't even know the grace of God and truth. But they know their standards. And I don't want to go there. I don't want to go there. So maybe I'll bend back further than even sometimes I am comfortable. Because I do not want the religion of touch not, taste not, handle not, after the commandments of men. But it goes back to this thing, and I think this is what got me thinking about it. This stuff is here because this is what people want. The technology is changing at a speed I can scarcely keep up with, that takes my breath away, because this is what people want. This is what they delight in. This is what they love. But brethren, what is it that gets us in trouble? It's what we love. It's what we want so often. What got Israel in trouble? In my darkness last night, I turned to Jeremiah. I'm reading through it to read chapter 3. I figured I'll turn the fountain. And I read this in Jeremiah 3:1. They say, if a man put away his wife and she go from him and become another man's, shall he return unto her again? Shall not the land be greatly polluted? But thou hast played the harlot with many lovers. Yet return again unto me, saith the Lord. Lift up thine eyes unto the high places, and see where thou hast not been lying with. In the ways as thou sat for them as an Arabian in the wilderness. And thou hast polluted the land with thy whoredoms and with thy wickedness. And therefore the showers have been withholden, and there have been no latter rain. And thou hast a whore's forehead, and refusest to be ashamed. Will thou not from this time cry to me, my Father? Thou art the guide of my youth. Will he reserve his anger forever? Will he keep it to the end? Blessings were being withheld. Frightful destructions were impending upon this nation, and Jeremiah had the woeful job of announcing the impending doom that made him a very unpopular man. But what got them in trouble? It was what they loved. It was what they wanted. It was what they liked. I love the book, and I'm about to read a very arresting chapter. It won't be long. Called Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman. God in heaven, we're there. And what do? We keep raising the bar of entertainment. We keep raising it. It was going to the movies on Saturday. Now the movies come into our home. I remember when I was a kid, Saturday night at the movies, one movie a week on TV, one! The rest were the sitcoms and the soap operas and the weekly runnings like I Love Lucy and Dick Van Dyke, what have you. One night at the movies on TV. It's 24/7. And then they're in our pockets now. Watch a movie anytime you want to, anywhere you are. Hook it up on the airplane. And then the TV gives way to the bigger screen. We keep getting bigger and bigger screens. Making the experience more and more tantalizing, more and more entertaining. Why do we get the bigger? Why do we get the bigger? Because we want to. Because we like it. Is it a sin? No. Are we allowed? Yes. Well, then what's your problem, Pastor? My problem is this. You keep raising the bar, raising the bar, raising the bar. Less becomes boring. Less becomes ungratifying. That's the problem. What's reading a novel compared to the big screen? Caroline's family will sometimes in the evening just sit and listen while one reads a novel. What's that? Sit and listen to somebody read a book? When you've got the big screen. We just keep raising the bar. Aye. We forget the words of Ecclesiastes. What gets us in trouble, people, are the things we love. Solomon said in Ecclesiastes 1:8, all things are full of labor. Man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. We can't hear enough. We can't see enough. We had a conversation as he debriefed me on the meeting this week. He has a leased vehicle, a new model. He told me on the radio station, 250 stations. What in the name of God does anybody need with 250 stations? What do we need with 100 channels? I'll tell you, where does that come from? The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear with hearing. And Solomon himself said that the man that loves silver will not be satisfied with silver. Ecclesiastes 5:10. He that loveth silver shall not be satisfied with silver. He that loveth abundance with increase. You see what the devil does. And he does it principally through advertising. And God knows with modern advertising he gets to us from every corner. He creates in our minds appetites. We go and we go and in an attempt to satisfy the appetite. But as we try to satisfy the appetite, what happens? It creates a greater appetite. And we just want more, bigger, better, faster. And we forget that a fundamental tenet of the gospel of Jesus Christ is temperance, which is the restraint of desire, the restraint of appetite, and the restraint of passion. Your character is not only revealed in the fact that you refuse to do those things that are forbidden, but that sometimes you make the choice to refuse what is allowed because of a principle, a higher good, a greater good. I'm going to forego that promotion because it will take too much time away from my family, and I don't want to pay that price. I will forego that athletic event or being a member of that team because it is going to take me away from something that I think is more important and I place more value upon. Because where your heart is, where your treasures are, there will your heart be also. Temperance. Temperance. We are told in 2 Peter, to add to our faith something very important. Verse 5. Beside this, giving all diligence, God really wants you to put your mind and heart to this one. Add to your faith virtue. You know what virtue is? It's the conformity of life and conduct with the principles of morality, voluntary observance of it, the recognized moral laws or standards of right conduct, abstention on moral grounds from any form or wrongdoing or vice. I have summarized that definition in the past, and it is a correct summary. Virtue is doing the right thing because you want to do the right thing, there comes the will, and because you need no other reason, it is the right thing to do. Now you've got to get that character trait in place first. You need that first, that resolve. Then you add knowledge, because virtue is going to help you to know what you need to know and what you don't need to know. To sift through the deluge of information to come at the knowledge worth having. And then to knowledge temperance. Because if you're not careful, even knowing the right thing will puff you up. So you need temperance to keep your things in check. I got so many things flooding in my head, I'm trying to figure out what I want to say next. Virtue. Just being a principled person that'll do things for no other reason than the principle. I gave some examples of things you might do for a principle, even though it seems little. Boycotting a store because it supports things you oppose. Canceling an email or a social networking account because you realize it's too much distraction. Refusing to use a digital device for a certain task to reduce dependency. Paying cash instead of using plastic because you want to just do that little bit of resistance against this move toward a cashless society, and you all know that's underfoot. Writing things on paper so as not to lose the knack. Delivering a speech extemporaneously, such as I am doing today. Or doing without television for a period of time. Patronizing a small local vendor instead of a super-sized chain store that is driving little men out of business. That's a few little ideas. And on we could go. An old song said, "Oh, where are the men of virtue to be found?" But let us go back, brethren. What gets us in trouble? It's the things we love. We have so many things because we love them. We want them. And that's allowable. But the problem is when we love it more than God. You know what brought the downfall of this race? You know what brought about the fall of this race? Love! Eve loved Adam. Boy, she saw a chance to do what looked like would improve their lives. Impart to them the knowledge of God's. Adam knew better. But he so loved Eve, he just didn't want to see her go down that chasm alone. Conrad said it well in a sermon. The problem was not that Adam loved Eve. The problem was that Adam loved Eve more than he loved God. And the problem is, when we love these things so much, and we fill our lives with them so much, that God, His truth, His Word gets crammed into a corner. Like Jesus said, the pleasures of this life and the cares of this world choke the Word. It's those things we love that can have such a choking effect. This is why warning after warning is against covetousness, that I want. I grew up in a family, my father's family. Not so much my mother's people, but my father's people were very materialistic. And they were not religious people at all. And you could sit around and you could listen to them talk. And this was what you heard over and over. Southern accent added for emphasis. I won't. That was the sum total of their lives. Covetousness. And I go back to Psalm 119, and it is not without purpose that these two thoughts are juxtaposed. In Psalm 119 and verse 36, incline mine heart unto thy testimonies and not to covetousness. It's all this wanting this and wanting that, the latest and the greatest. It's that interferes with the testimonies and the influence of them in our lives. I notice it. We can speak more eloquently of a movie and a television series that we like. We can go on and on about what we saw, about what we liked, about what we remembered. But when a scriptural subject comes up, we become strangely quiet. Why? I labor under the difficulty that if I mention a Bible character or a Bible event, the chances are great that many of you in here will not even know what I'm talking about. Then I'll have to go back there and dig it out and explain it because you know so little about it. I go back to our conversation, Greg. He's preparing a message. I'm going to have him preach for me. I'm going to have him and John Yersinski speak for me when I go to Pennsylvania in mid-April. And he wants to talk about health. And he remembered this verse. And it says, the tongue of the wise is health. And this is what he said to me. He says, I know it's in the book of Proverbs. I don't know. And principle. I'm not going to go on my phone or on my device to find out where it is. I'm going to look for it. Like Jesus said, search the Scriptures. I think these devices that search for us are breeding ignorance. We don't know where things are unless we've got our little machine. That's a shame. That's a shame. And I said, well, I know where it is. I was flipping. I knew it was in Proverbs. He knew it was in Proverbs. I knew it was there too. And I could remember where it was on the page. And I flipped around and said, I've got it, Greg. He said, don't tell me. I said, I won't. I'll not rob him of the blessing of finding it, searching for it. But this comes at what I'm talking about and what lies at this root of this pitiful ignorance of what should be the most important thing for us to know. Our God. The first commandment, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy soul, with all thy mind, with all thy heart, with all thy strength. What are the testimonies about? They reveal to us that God to love and how to love. Oh, Satan knows what he's doing. Oh, yes, it's what people want. Oh, yes, it's what people like. But just never you forget this, children. Never you forget this. In 1 John chapter 2, verses 15 and 16. Love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. I don't care how much he says it is. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes. Satan's always putting something out there for you to want. Look at that. And the pride of life. Oh, we want to be like everybody else. We want to do what everybody else is doing. Do you know the kids now that don't take these mobile devices to school, they get persecuted? They're not in. They're not up to speed. Pride of life. Emulation. Got to be like other folks. Keep up with the Joneses. Is not of the Father, but of the world. I'm going to say something. And all I want you to do is just think about what I'm saying. And you do with it what you want to. That's the way we leave it. Bible study is important, isn't it? Have I made a case? I conduct a midweek Bible study. Bible study. What do we go there for? What's it for? What's the reason? Opportunity to learn a little more. Amen. Opportunity to learn a little more. I make it voluntary. I tell you that up front. Meaning you come if you want to. You don't have to come if you don't want to. No consequences. I'm not going to think you're not a Christian. I'm not going to love you the less. I'm not going to not be there for you. Voluntary. But I want you to look at how that's worded. Voluntary. You know what I do? I throw that Bible study into the court of the will. What do you will to do? What do you want to do? The word voluntary comes from a Latin word which means the will. And it's interesting that in the Romance languages that come from Latin and Spanish, the word will is volontude. In French, volonté, the will. So you're there, if you come, because you will to be there. You choose to be there. Some of you do not come, not because you do not choose, but because your job situation or distance or infirmity hinders it. Some of you do not come simply because you do not want to. And that's your choice. That's your choice. I don't demand you answer to me for that. I'll leave that for you to answer to God. And others of you do not come because you choose to do other things that obviously for you outweigh in value that. Because remember, where your treasure is, There's where your choices arise from. Now, why would I say that? When I know that the very saying of that stings. But why would I not say it? I have to look within myself. Would it be because I am afraid to hurt you? To make you uncomfortable? Or to put a crimp in our relationship? And what is my point in saying it? Is just for every one of you, when you face decisions, to do or not to do, get down, look down, and ask yourself why. What motivates this? Why am I making this decision? Why do I will not to? Or why do I will to? To train you to look beyond all of the justifications and excuses and rationalizations down to the core of where it really is for all of us. The will. Now, I'll read this to you and I'll let you go. I haven't said everything. I'll think of other things later. Like I said, I didn't plan this. And some of it, you may wonder, what's he talking about? Well, maybe, I hope that's not the net effect of it, but if it is, well, I tried. I want to read something to you. Listen to this, people. We were keeping our eye on 1984. When the year came and the prophecy didn't, that was Orwell's 1984. Thoughtful Americans sang softly in praise of themselves. The roots of liberal democracy had held. Whatever else the terror had happened, wherever else the terror had happened, we at least had not been visited by Orwellian nightmares. But we had forgotten that alongside Orwell's dark vision, there was another, slightly older, slightly less well-known, equally chilling. Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. Contrary to common belief, even among the educated, Huxley and Orwell did not prophesy the same thing. Orwell warns that we will be overcome by an externally imposed oppression. But in Huxley's vision, no big brother is required to deprive people of their autonomy, maturity, and history. As he saw it, people will come to love their oppression, to adore the technologies that undo their capacities to think. My God. What Orwell feared were those who would ban books. What Huxley feared was that there would be no reason to ban a book, for there would be no one who wanted to read one. Orwell feared those who would deprive us of information. Huxley feared those who would give us so much that we would be reduced to passivity and egoism. Orwell feared that the truth would be concealed from us. Huxley feared the truth would be drowned in a sea of irrelevance. My God. My God. You say, why do you say, my God? I guess I'm reaching out to hold in the face of such naked, startling truth. Unpleasant. Orwell feared we would become a captive culture. Huxley feared we would become a trivial culture, preoccupied with some equivalent of the feelies, the orgy-porgy, and the centrifugal bumble puppy, whatever that is. As Huxley remarked in Brave New World Revisited, the civil libertarians and rationalists are ever on the alert to oppose tyranny, but they fail to take into account man's almost infinite appetite for distractions. In 1984, Huxley added, people are controlled by inflicting pain. In Brave New World, they are controlled by inflicting pleasure. In short, Orwell feared that what we hate will ruin us. Huxley feared that what we love will ruin us. And Huxley was right. Yes. Yes. Exactly. We were talking yesterday, Edgar and I, how much we give away ourselves and our information for convenience. I don't like the idea of all the books being on an electronic device that somebody can then zap when they want to. I don't like a driverless car when they might decide one day that there's places they don't want those cars to go. Oh, say you're a conspiracy buff. That would never happen. Dream on, you fool. Dream on, you fool. You don't know my adversary like I know him. You don't know him like I know him. But alas, we want what we want, don't we? And maybe we don't have it because, well, I can't afford it today. But just as soon as the cash eases up a little bit, oh, I'd go for that toy I wanted. You see it all the time. See it all the time. I'm going to say something that's going to sting like hell. You ever stop to think that maybe one reason God doesn't let you have more money than you have is because He knows what you'd do with it if you had it? And He's faithful and He won't let you be tempted above that you're able to bear. You ever stop and think He may not be letting you have better health than you have because He knows what you do with it? Amen. And if that sounds hard, or maybe He has very confining and difficult circumstances that are imposed upon you that hold you back from so much you wish you could do. Why does He do that? Because He knows what you'd do if you didn't have those restraints. And if you feel picked on by that, I bring to a witness stand none other than the eminent Apostle Paul himself. That giant, spiritual giant that said a messenger of Satan was imposed upon him for this reason, lest he be exalted above measure through the abundance of the revelations given to him. God knew how to knock him down and keep him humble. Because He knew if he didn't have that there, He'd let that go to his head. Brethren, yes, it's here because we want it. Yes, it's here because we love it. And it's what we love that gets us in trouble. I will love Thee, O Lord. There's the will. A will that means that sometimes when something comes into my life I love, and I see it interfering with the love of God, I have two conflicting loves. I have a cross in the will, and discipleship is when I say no to my will and yes to His. When I say no to me and yes to Him. Because if I'll be dead honest and get down in my heart, this thing that I'm allowing my life is distracting me and taking me away from what ought to be the passion and most important thing in my life, and that is that I love the God that made me and sent His Son to die to save me. Peter drew that draft of fishes into the shore, and Jesus said, "Lovest thou me more than these?" Oh, we do love our draft of fishes, don't we? Lovest thou me more than these? And it all comes down to what we're about to do. I want to bring it to Jesus. David, your prayer this morning, you prayed about our loving God. And you wanted focus on Christ. Well, let's bring it there. Before Jesus ever served the Lord's Supper, He said, "Now is my soul troubled." John 12, what shall I say? Save me from this hour, but for this hour came I into the world. And yet so great was His love for God, and so great was His love for His apostles, that He was able to subliminate and hold down that troubled mind so that He could spread a feast that would bring untold joy for centuries to poor sinners. To be reminded their sins are forgiven through the sacrifice of Christ. And then he emerges from there to the garden, and the whole of his life was the subjection of his will to the will of God. I came not to do mine own will, but the will of him that sent me. This is my meat, that I should do my Father's will, said he. And he comes to the dark agony of Gethsemane. And as the lurid and horrible scenes of the sufferings of an eternal hell, under the revenging frown of a holy and angry God, closed in upon him, and he knew this he must suffer. He says, if it be possible, O Father, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as thou wilt. That was the beat of his heart. That was the passion of his life. It all came down to the will. He made a determination and a decision. If every choice you make in your life is made because it's convenient or because it's easy, you will never be a disciple of Jesus Christ. Never, never. For the essence of discipleship is to deny ourselves and take up our cross and follow him. Aren't we so happy this morning that Jesus did not choose the convenient and easy way out? Had he, we would have burned in hell forever. But he took his will and he bent it to conformity to a higher will for the redemption of our souls. And if we would be his followers, we will do the same. Examine your heart. Get down to the will. Why am I the way I am? Why do I have what I have? Why do I do what I do? Get down to the will. And then take that and look at how much that's shaped by what you love. Look at how much that's shaped by what you enjoy. And then look at the will of God, the love of God, the knowledge of God, the growth in God through his word. And see how much this affects that. And then make the decisions that you know you ought to make, whatever those may happen to be. Again, I apologize. It was scattered and here and there and all over, but that's such as I have. God bless.